If you're thinking about ISO certification, you probably have one big question, like what is ISO? But maybe you have more questions, like how long does it take to get certified? Or how much effort does it take? How much effort from me and my employees will it take? Or maybe you wonder, how much is that going to cost? But most importantly, you're probably wondering, is it worth it? Have other companies seen benefits in their businesses when they implemented ISO? In this video, I will break everything down so that you can make an important decision when it comes to becoming ISO certified. I will show you what having ISO certification actually is and what it means for your company, what it really takes to get certified, from timeline to effort to cost, and most importantly, what you actually get out of it, so you can decide if it's truly worth it for your business. Most people think of ISO certification as a project. Now, don't get me wrong, we actually treat it as a project when we are selling it to our clients that we can help them get certified. But the certification portion is a project. The rest is not, and I will explain. Imagine this. I'm sure you've heard or seen, or maybe you are part of a long-term marriage. And you know that marriage is not just a go to court and get your marriage certificate. You probably heard that marriage takes a lot of work. However, getting up to the day where you get married, that is almost like a project. There is a lot of planning to do and invitations to send, and the food needs to be planned, and the venue and the flowers. There's a lot of preparation up to the day of getting married. So that is like a project, and that you can compare it to getting ISO certified. There's a lot of preparation up to the moment you get certified. There's a lot of work, no doubt, but that day will come, and that day will be the end of that particular stage. Once you pass that, it's a long road, just like in marriage. A lot of work, and it's gonna take the two of you or the whole family to make it work. And the same thing could be said about ISO. Once you get certified, that is actually when a lot of the work or more work starts. You're gonna have to keep up with that certification for as long as you wanna remain certified. So now that you understand that ISO is not a one-time project, let me break down what ISO really is and what it actually takes, so that you can go into this with your eyes wide open. So let's start with the basics. What is ISO? ISO is a standard, a set of requirements. It's like having a manual for your business. Now, when I talk about ISO, it almost looks like I'm talking about one standard, but there are many standards, and you could call them like flavors. There's a flavor for quality, and a flavor for environmental, and a flavor for safety. So they are just flavors, and you get to pick the flavor that you believe is gonna make the most impact in your company. But what each of these flavors of standards do is should help your company build a structure, an infrastructure for that particular area. When you implement ISO, it means that you are implementing a management system. And that's just like a way of saying you are improving your company in that particular area or flavor you chose, which could be, like we said, quality, environmental, safety, or even information security. In other words, you're building a more structured way to run your business that is going to make things more consistent, repeatable, and measurable. Now, before we move on to the timeline, one thing I want to mention is that ISO itself, the organization that comes up with these standards, it is not the one that provides a certificate. Certificates are provided by registrars. They are the ones that come to audit you and give you the certificate. So the certificate is the proof that you are certified. But the system itself, that is the real work. And that's why everything that we're going to talk about here, the timeline, the effort, the cost, centers around building and running that system. By the way, if you're interested to know more about registrars, I have another video and I will leave the link in the description. All right, so now that we know what ISO is at the basic level, let's talk about the timeline. How long does it take to get certified? Now that you know that ISO is not just a certificate, that ISO is a living and breathing system, and that registrars are the ones that give the ISO certificate, let's talk about one of the first questions you might be asking yourself. How long does it actually take to get certified? The honest answer is, it depends. I know, don't shoot me. You probably weren't expecting that. But it does depend on the size of your company, how many people you have, the experience of your people, and of course, it depends on how you approach the entire process. In our business, half of the companies sometimes come in a hurry and they want to get certified fast. There's another half that really wants to take their time. They have heard about ISO, they know it's a good thing, and so they just want to do it at their own pace. Don't worry, at the end of this video, I will let you know exactly what is doable and what is not. But let me first explain why the certification timeline depends on the size of your company and other factors. First of all, you have to understand that in order to get certified, there's a lot of things to do. And some of them can be done in parallel, but some of them may have to be done in sequence, which means you have to finish this before you do that. And so there is only so much that you can compress. One of the first things you're going to do is provide the training to your people. They have to know what's happening, right? Well, that's going to take time. The more people you have, the more training there will have to be done. If there is only a handful of people, then you all can take training within a week. But if you have 1,000 people, then there's going to be several rounds. Even if it is self-paced, people are not going to take it all right away. So that takes time. Even if you have your own steering committee who's going to help get certified, again, that is going to take time to get them trained. So you have to start by acknowledging that is where some of the timeline goes. Now, if you are already trained, well, next comes the implementation, which is the bulk of everything. And there's a lot to do there. There's a lot of requirements to put in place. Maybe your company already has a lot of things in place, which is wonderful. Then you only have to formalize certain things. But if you don't have a lot of things in place, well, that means you're going to have to put a lot of things from scratch, and that takes time. No matter how much you want to make things faster, it is going to take a little bit of time to come up with the process, the procedures, put it in place, and retrain the people. Maybe some of them were following and some of them weren't, so you're going to have to retrain them also and making sure that everybody's following these new processes. But alongside, within that implementation, there's a lot of things to put in place, which I will explain more when I explain the effort portion of getting ISO certified. But for now, it just suffices that there's only so much you can compress in your timeline. So it is doable, maybe 3 or 4 months that you implement the system, but then comes the next stage, is you have to actually put it in practice. The ISO standard requires that at least you have your system in practice for 3 to 4 months. So if you did not really have anything in place, then you probably don't have the records to substantiate that you were doing something. So if you finish implementing everything today, well, you might have to wait 3 or 4 months to build those records. Now, in our company, we help people get certified. We know some shortcuts, but there is only so much we can do. We cannot also just produce fake records. So we have a little bit of shortcuts, but you still have to wait. Now, once you have gone through that, then you have to conduct your internal audit. And if you are a small company, maybe in a couple of days, you finish the audit. But if you are a large company, 1,000 people, you probably could have 1 week, 2 weeks worth of audits, depending on the standard. ISO 14001, ISO 45001, those are the standards that could last for weeks, depending on the size of your company. So you need to add that to the timeline, especially because once you go through the audit, you probably will have some findings, meaning like things that you need to follow up. And again, that takes time. So it's not something that you can finish in one day. So all of that adds to the timeline. After the internal audit, then you have the management review. That's a much shorter event, but you still have to prepare for it, conduct it, and after that management review, there's probably going to be some actions that you have to take care, which again, very unlikely that it's going to just take one day. And then of course, the last part is your actual certification audit, which usually has about a month apart between the stage 1 and the stage 2. So overall, you can see that you already are building like 3, 4, 5 months, could be more, and that will be the minimum depending on the size of your company. So the takeaway here is ISO is not just a series of short steps and then get done. There's a lot of things that can be done sometimes in parallel, but sometimes have to be done in sequence, and you have to wait. One of the biggest mistakes here that you can make is rush it or not even give people the training they need. And in that case, everything that comes after will probably not be done as good, and by the time you get to your certification audit, you might even be risking it if you had a lot of findings along the way. So the best thing is you want to plan for your timeline. You want to plan your certification journey well so that you have sufficient time. If you need help coming up with that timeline, I have a video for that, and I will leave that in the description also. So can you do this in 4 months, for example? With knowledgeable and plentiful resources, it is possible because this part of the ISO certification can be treated as a project. Could this be 2 years? Absolutely. If you treat it differently, and maybe if you do not assign as many resources to the project. If you're interested in knowing how long we normally take to help a company, then stay tuned and I will explain that at the end of this video. All right, so we've covered what ISO is, what the timeline might be. Now let's talk about the effort. How much time is it gonna take me? That's what I hear when companies come to us. How much time is it going to take me, and how much time is it going to take from my employees? And when they come to us like that, sometimes I don't even know what to say. It's like, are you wanting to work more or are you wanting to work less? Because, you know, we have a couple of ways to help you, and in one way we help by the hour, and so maybe they want to do more. I don't understand where they are coming from. I'm assuming that people want to do less, and which means they want us to help more. And that is normal because everybody has their job. So you're trying to assess, how much is this really going to take? Do I need to hire a lot more people? There is going to be some effort, and let's talk about that. So like we said before, you should start with training your employees. So that's not a lot of effort, but that is something that they have to attend training. Now, if you want to do it on your own, of course, that'll be a lot of effort because you're going to have to put together the training to give to your employees. Nowadays, though, with AI, you can probably come up with something. But I will say that for the steering committee or the key stakeholders who will be in charge of the project, or the ones that own some processes, you probably want to give them more formal training so that they become knowledgeable. But that is going to be, minimal effort. Then you have the leadership engagement. That could be a lot of effort. If your leaders have already bought into this, that's wonderful. They will almost clear the path for you to do the work, you and your team. But if leadership is not engaged, everything will be harder, because when you want to try to get some things done, they'll be asking you, why are you wasting your time on that when you should be doing something else? Or they might expect you to do both and to still output as much as you were doing before. So that could be a lot of work, could be a challenge if top management or the leadership has not bought in. So it may take a lot of effort that you probably want to conquer before you start the project, especially on standards like, for example, ISO 45001, which is the occupational health and safety, because that standard really has a lot of requirements for top management. And even ISO 9001 now, the new revision that is coming up, we looked at the draft and it has some new requirements for top management that is going to make them also have to commit a lot more. So you want to get that out of the way. You want to have their full commitment. You want to have their full buy-in. That way your effort is less. Now, the third effort is just the involvement on the implementation. I mentioned before during the timeline that there was a lot that needed to be done, and let's go through some of that. There's going to be requirements, for example, for your purchasing team, because they need to manage the purchases, the suppliers, and those are big requirements in most of the standards. You're going to have to reevaluate your suppliers. There's going to be requirements for HR, because they usually are the ones that administer the training and find the competency of employees. So there's a lot of requirements towards that. But there's, of course, a lot of requirements in operations. Equipment that will need to be calibrated, send out. Well, you're going to have to find who's going to calibrate if it wasn't being done. You're going to have to inventory. You're going to have to send the equipment out for calibration. So there's going to be a lot of things that need to be done. Equipment will need to be maintained if it wasn't. If you're in a manufacturing, of course, you're going to have to come up with a policy. And although that might seem trivial, sometimes it takes a lot, especially if you have a lot of layers of management, because they are going to have to kind of agree. And sometimes even that, believe it or not, I have seen not being done in time. So it could take a lot of effort to have them all agree on one policy, but that's just one of the things. You're going to have to do risk assessment. You're going to have to look at your processes and see where there are risks. So that's going to take some effort for people, first of all, to put together the process, to understand the process, then go through the risk assessment, and then do something about it if you happen to find a significant risk. Then you're going to have a lot of corrective actions, because you want to try to come up with improvements or identify the improvements and log them. And so you're going to have to follow up and do corrective action or root cause analysis on corrective action. So there's a lot of things to do there, and that's a lot of effort. So it is going to take some time. It's definitely, like we said on the timeline, not just a 1 month or a week. But even then, it's going to take a few hours from your employees every week, and then for some of them every day. So when people come to us, like I mentioned before, I think what they are trying to say is, how many hours of my time every day or every week? And the truth is, if you are a process owner, it probably will be several hours a week. While if you are just an employee following somebody's order, maybe not so much, because you are just going to have to be trained and then follow what you are told. So there's still some effort. Now, you can get help, right? This is where companies sometimes hire a consultant to help them. And let me just give you an analogy. If you have a big project and you get all your people together to do it, let's say you have to finish this in 1 day, and you let everybody go to lunch, and everybody just goes to lunch at different times, then you wasted a lot of time, because maybe some took 1 hour, some took an hour and a half, and by the time you regroup, you already wasted 2 to 3 hours, when if you would have brought lunch in and kept everybody huddled in the room, then you probably would have gotten a lot more from everybody. So Yes, there is a cost, but you got them to work a little bit of extra time. Think of that like having a consultant. You will have somebody that will help you and will handhold you a little bit more, but guess what? Will take you to the finish line faster. Anyways, if you want to know more about whether hiring a consultant is good or not for you, I also have a video, and I will also leave the link in the description. All right, so let's talk about the part that probably everybody is wanting to know, which is, how much does ISO certification really cost? Well, I'll be upfront with you. It depends. I know, don't shoot me. Again, this is another one where it depends on the size of your company, the number of locations, how many employees, how many standards even you're getting certified. There could be a lot of variation. One thing is true here. If it's cheap and easy, it's probably poor quality, which means if you bought some documents on the internet, most unlikely they are poor quality. They probably won't help your company, and who knows if they even represent what you are doing. So at the end of the day, they probably won't help a lot. For now, let me just break where the costs come from to get certified. So first is the certification cost, the cost of the registrar. Their prices might be similar, however, they are all going to quote you different days for your audit, especially if you have many locations and many standards. So that is one cost that you're going to have to think about. Then you have the implementation cost, which, like we said, there's going to be a lot of things to do. If you weren't doing maintenance, you're going to have to do that now. If you weren't doing calibration, you're going to have to do that now. You're going to have to train your employees. You're going to have to put things in place that you didn't have before. Maybe you're going to buy a software. So all of these costs are going to have to be added up. Not to mention the cost of your employees taking the time to do this, which of course you already pay them, so maybe you won't see that as much as on other things that you're going to have to spend and invest. Now, like we said before, you might also choose to hire a consultant, and that of course will add to the cost, but like we said, there might be some advantages to that. Now, the third cost is other expenses. Like when you have the auditors come, they will probably charge for their travel, and that will be from the registrar or maybe other people that you hire to do internal audits. If you are a large organization, like we also mentioned, your audit might take several days or weeks, and so that's going to add up if you have auditors coming from out of town. In summary, the biggest cost of the ISO certification on the first go around is all these costs of the certification itself, the audits, and of course the implementation. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see from companies is that they only budget for certain things or just for the first year. But remember, this is a long-term thing, so you really should budget for years to come, because once you get certified, all these things have to continue to be put in place, and the registrar is going to continue to charge you because they have to come and audit you every year. You're going to have to continue to do your internal audits every year. So all those costs still need to be added, but obviously there will be some that only happen the first year. So if you want to take one thing from here is plan your budget with all these costs. Now, if you're interested in learning more about costs, I do have a video about the cost of ISO, and I'm going to leave a link to that in the description. All right, so we've talked about the timeline, the effort, the cost, and we are on the last crossroad where you want to know, is this worth it? What are the benefits of getting ISO certified? So let me give you my honest answer. It depends on how you use it. If you just want a certificate on the wall, then I will say this might not be worth it. The effort, the timeline, and the cost might not be worth it if all you want is for a certificate on the wall. But if you use ISO the right way to demonstrate to your customers that you're certified, but also to improve your company, the benefits are endless and amazing. Let me break it into two parts. First, let's talk about the external benefits. ISO certification gives you credibility. It shows your customer, your partners, and sometimes even regulatory bodies, that your company follows a standard recognized all over the world. If you are in the circles of industry and companies, people will know about ISO. If you're on a consumer, maybe they don't know, but on a B2B, business to business, people know about ISO. And so this is not a nice to have, it's probably something that you have to have. Now, so that brings me to the second benefit, which is it is required to be on some contracts. So that is a benefit, because in many contracts, instead of having to answer several questions, all you have to do is show that you're certified, and then you'll be able to bid on a specific job. Another benefit is that you'll be able to enter certain markets or even be considered as a supplier. Before, maybe you were not able to enter on a certain market or even be a supplier for a certain company if you were not certified. Because for some companies, that is the bare minimum, is that you have an ISO certification on a specific standard, which depends on what maybe the industry is. So this will give you definitely that advantage. So in this sense, these certificates can definitely open doors for you. But here is where it gets more interesting, the internal benefits, because that's where real transformation happens. When a company implements ISO the right way, then you will see in your employees this huge mindset shift. The processes will be more clear for everybody, because before maybe things were informal. Well, guess what? Now they are more formal, and people on the floor like that. Your employees want that clarity. They want to know, what is it that I'm supposed to do? So people will understand their roles better. That's another benefit. The company performance will improve because people know what to do and errors will diminish. That is true when you put a good ISO system in place, management system. Instead of reacting to problems, you will start having that improvement mindset. And so you will start to prevent things from going wrong. You will also be able to even grow at a more efficient way, because instead of relying on just a few key people who know how things work, now the system, your management system, is going to be supporting your entire organization. So this mindset shift from reactive to proactive is huge, and is one of the biggest advantages and benefits of becoming certified. So as you can imagine, these benefits don't come from just a certificate. They come from using the system. And I can tell you that the companies that we have seen getting certified, wow, it is amazing, especially the ones that do put the resources and the budget. They really get to improve. They really get to reap the benefits of the certification. But we have also seen companies that after all the celebration is done, then they forget about their management systems. And so that's not something that you want either. So in summary, the certificate does open doors, but it's the system that will help you improve your company. And if you commit to using it, then yes, ISO certification is absolutely worth it. So let's bring this all together. If you are considering ISO certification, there are 4 things you're going to have to think about. The timeline, which, as you know, the certification portion could be a project, but the rest is a journey that you're going to have to keep up forever. Then there is the effort. You're going to need the people and the leadership to help you put things in place and maintain the certification. The cost, which is not just the audit cost, it is the cost of getting certified, and then you're still going to have to keep the budget to stay certified. And then you get to reap the benefits, which show up if you actually use the system. So if you go with the right expectation, all of this is absolutely doable, and we do it all the time. So you stuck around for the bonus section. So let me give you some details that may help you make your decision. First of all, regarding registrars, we like working with the registrars that have auditors worldwide. But like I said, I have a video that I'm going to leave a link in the description so that you can learn a little bit more about those registrars. Now, another question that you stuck around is probably because you want to know if you need a consultant or not. Well, we have a video that actually goes in very much detail, but let me tell you, it is something that you can do on your own if you have the manpower, the resources to do it. Now, how long do we take? Normally, we don't take more than a year, that is for sure. Most of our projects are 6 to 8 months in average. We could do some projects in an expedited fashion, is what we call it, so maybe less than 6 months, and we might take more time if it's a larger company, but very rarely, if ever, we will take more than a year. If we do, it's probably because the company itself had some issues and they delayed the project. Now, the cost, depending on the size of your company, there is a starting place. For example, if you are about 10 to 20 people and one location, then this is the price. Or if you have more people, it will go up from there. So if you're thinking about getting certified and you need help, you can always contact our company and we can certainly help you become ISO certified.